Hi, everybody. This is day 1378, and Richard has been officially declared deceased. However, his body is missing. His body is missing, and 4 years, almost 4 years, not quite, but almost 4 years of collecting all kinds of evidence has absolutely indicated that the military has Richard's remains, that the FBI found his remains, and of course, then the military would have his remains. Is this possible that something so horrific could happen? Well, if you have Jesus Nieto, known as Eddie Nieto Jr., as the supervisory FBI, that has conflicts of interest up to no good, and his wife right there on Fort Bliss and intelligence up to no good. It makes you wonder what kind of intelligence, right? What kind of intelligence? And then with the Lieutenant Colonel Bugado and the G3 of the 32nd ADCOM, conflicts of interest, and having Bradford Bugado's father-in-law being an agent of the FBI, declaring that Richard's remains were found in Mexico and corroborated by the Department of State there, corroborated by PAO Ali Payne, corroborated by Lieutenant General Sean Bernabe, corroborated by DHS liaison to the Department of State, Jaime Corona, corroborated. I'm just thinking of all the DES, Thomas Kane, right? So, and more and more. So, we're not just saying, oh, they have Richard's remains, just, without any evidence, without anything to back it up. No, there's plenty. There is plenty. And as you know, let me see, I'm going to get on Facebook to make sure that everything's running okay, that you can hear me. I'll lift this up a little bit so I don't have to bend over. Okay. Make sure it's running okay. Yep, looks good. We changed the pictures, and I probably should have done it. Hello, Kathleen. Thank you so much. I probably should have done it a long time ago because that's such a beautiful picture of him in uniform. And we have to preserve not only Richard and his legacy, but also the legacy of the uniform, because our information that we have also indicates that he was forcibly removed from the barracks in his uniform and murdered in his uniform and taken off of Fort Bliss in his uniform, and that his corpse was desecrated. That's information that we have, and that he was dismembered to be buried in multiple areas, places. So now that we have the designation, there's a lot of paperwork and you have to go through it. And of course, with almost 4 years of our rights being violated, right? there was a soldier at Fort Hood, and I just posted it up, and it really got to me today that, he was never found. His remains were never found. But the Army designated him deceased after, I think, 5 months, right? Well, it might have been sooner than that. Um, so we've always known from the beginning, we made it very clear to them. But the retaliation was, no, no, you've got, he walked away. No, where is he? And there's plenty of evidence. And with time, we even have more evidence that he was murdered. And there's all kinds of indications. And going through the paperwork, one thing that we realized is that there's a huge discrepancy. There's a lot of discrepancies, but one of the big discrepancies is his rank, right? And I don't know if you all remember, if you have been following from the beginning, but very early on, when we looked at, they were saying, oh, this is a troubled soldier. Yeah, he was troubled about all the trafficking, about all the drug trafficking, the kid trafficking, the sex trafficking, the weapons trafficking, gun trafficking, you can call it, and of course, let's call it bullet trafficking. Let's call it ammunition trafficking. There was all kinds of stuff going on, and absolutely, the barracks, they were not following the SOPs. There was all kinds of pimping going on, and it was a marketplace um, for the drugs. And so that was very clear to us. And we did get confirmation that Richard was a whistleblower from unit members saying that the IG were all over the barracks because of Halliday. We got it from Belen Rocha that Richard had called multiple times to the CPS and to make complaints that he was in possession of tapes that were not too good, and he turned those in. Um, we absolutely got corroboration, had that all corroborated by the general, General David Stewart, Brigadier General David Stewart, who confirmed that the barracks were all full with all these weapons, flushed with weapons, and that the CID was like, it wasn't just that barrack, it was all of Fort Bliss, and and then in the meetings that absolutely an audit was going on. They were in trouble, and so the for Richard to be that kind of whistleblower, um, he's a pretty smart cookie. He knew what was going on. Okay. He knew what was going on. He was guidon bearer, which is very important to this because my dad kept on telling us, God rest his soul, that Richard would have access to the leadership because he was guidon bearer. And he would see things that some wouldn't. And then also, Richard, of course, was trying to become an agent for the Criminal Investigative Division. He wanted to be law enforcement. So, of course, he would gravitate to CID, and Marlon Soto even confirmed that. So, that gave him, a front row seat to see the crimes that were being committed there on Fort Bliss, and clearly it was he was retaliated against. Clearly it was leadership participating in these crimes, because when you look at the timeline and you look at the paperwork and the irregularities and the severity of the retaliation against him. Um, and, it's very clear that it was absolutely abuse of power and retaliation. And so let me explain. Because in April and May of 2020, Richard was receiving a permanent GOMAR, not just a regular GOMAR. He received a permanent GOMAR. That means they weaponized the GOMAR to destroy him, really to put him out of the military, right? And they started the chaptering of him. And he was then also given a field grade Article 15 with maximum punishment and then some. And this was also in the 15-6, all recorded that they were giving him over and above the punishments that were allowable. Okay, so not only did he get the field grade Article 15 with the 45 days of extra duty, with removing 3 ranks from him, with removing 50% of his pay for 2 months. They made him do the 45 days of extra duty wearing full battle gear. And they go, oh, well, that's a gray area. No, that's a punishment. That's, that's an extra punishment. And of course, COVID, so that he was masked out, especially in El Paso in May. It's hot. So, that is extra punishment. And then you say, wow, what did he do? What did he do? And that's what we wanted to know. If you're going to give someone a permanent GOMAR within, this is all in a few weeks of each other, right? Or the same time, exactly same time. If you're going to give them a permanent GOMAR, if you're going to give them a field grade Article 15 with maximum punishment and then some, and the chaptering, right? So, and then to be in those kind of barracks where it's ripe for bullying, just absolutely not a place that you would want to live, right? Which the SOP, the Standard Operating Procedure, absolutely says. I've read it, I've shared it, I have it. Says that the barracks has to be a place where they would want to live. Absolutely. They rather go sleep in their car, right? They rather go sleep in their car because there's a security breach. There's a huge security breach that puts our soldiers at risk for all kinds of things, and even their life, even for a forced removal from the barracks in uniform. And so they were giving him this kind of punishment. For what? For what? For January 24th, 25th, because it happened at midnight, right? For that DUI. That was not even, let's call it what it is. And a canine illegal traffic stop in a well-lit parking lot at midnight that was told with no probable cause. And Richard, and look, back then we've had a petition out, and I just pulled it up because I wanted to see if it was still there. It's still there. I think you can still sign that petition. We have a petition to rescind Richard's field grade Article 15. Please sign it if it's still available to be signed. Please sign it. Please sign it. Because what they did to Richard was for this illegal frame job that Richard, they had the video of him standing at attention saying, yes, sir, answering questions, being absolutely beautiful way back then. But let's get to the real point of it. The real point is that they levied these penalties, these punishments against Richard when it was an ongoing case. And Lieutenant Colonel Roddick signed his name, agreeing that he would first hear out all the evidence and see if Richard was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, right? But yet he signed it April 20th, 2020, when the case was ongoing and Richard was maintaining his innocence throughout it, and was dismissed July 9th, 2020. Now, it was a pretrial diversion dismissal, which means the judge is just being careful. I hope it is a dismissal, but I'm going to give a little cushion time there just in case. But everyone knew at July 9th that was a dismissal. And Richard had maintained his innocence throughout. But yet, he was already finished being punished. He had already did 45 days of extra duty in full battle gear with a mask on, with maybe 4 hours to sleep every night and to take a shower. And so when we were getting bullied, they were like, at the end, he couldn't even take a shower. No, he couldn't take a shower. I mean, what do you want? You want to sleep for a few hours? I mean, can you imagine what they put him through, and then to bully him that he didn't even have time to sleep and take a shower? And if you look back at all the pictures of Richard, he's a fine dresser. He's a fine dresser. Beautiful young man. So they were just destroyed. That was also retaliatory. The bullying. So they absolutely, and who's going after him? Major General Clem Coward was abusing his power, and Lieutenant Colonel Michael Roddick was abusing his power. And they had that video. They absolutely could get that video. And when we were there after Richard had been murdered, okay, because all of this retaliation escalated the hate. And you see what we received the other day, calling Richard the N-word. So the hate escalated, and it is still there. This is an act of hate. An act of hate to a whistleblower that wants to protect children, that wants to protect young mothers, that wants to protect the American people's assets. What right do they have to take our weapons and sell them over the border? Our ammunition, and sell them over the border and pocket the money. Pocket it after it was washed. It has to be washed, right? And so, we have this paperwork now that Richard has been declared deceased, that took us almost 4 years of hard work every day. I still, I cannot even believe what they have put us through. It is absolutely unspeakable what they have put us through. And now, even in this declaration of death, because Richard's remains are still not given to us, we have to carefully, without any trust, there's no trust there, go through this paperwork, get legal help here in South Carolina to make sure, and praise God. God always provides, right? And go through this paperwork. And what pops up again? Richard's ring. And do we sign off on his retaliation? Because that's what it seems like to us. To us, when they put down, even though in the paperwork that we received in this open records we received, they had the computer did it. They promoted Richard twice, right? And yet in the paperwork they have him as a private. And would you sign that? We just can't sign that. There's just, we just can't sign that. So now we have to formulate a letter, send that in to the CAO. The CAO has to then mitigate this because we want Richard's restored. Because, and I got off track a little bit, because why did they give him that? For something that he was innocent of. And that's not me saying he was innocent. That's Judge Almatrejo. That's the state. The state, after looking at the case, after looking at the video of what happened, says he's innocent. That's not me. That's due process. And you have Michael Roddick ignoring due process. You have Clem Coward ignoring due process. And that's why I said when July 9th came, it was July 7th and then officially July 9th. When that came, what were they going to do? Were they going to go and apologize to Richard? Were they going to give him his rank back? Were they going to give him some compensation for all what they put him through? Or were they going to murder him? Were they going to order a code red? Well, we know right now that Richard is dead. We know right now that we just received a notice of death. So they can falsely accuse him, give him the punishment before he even gets a chance to defend himself and go through due process. Totally bully him, destroy him, retaliate against him, everything they could against him. And then he's murdered. And then his body is not respected. The corpse is not respected. And then we're supposed to sign this paper? I don't think so. I don't think right at this minute, with the paperwork the way it is, it needs to be corrected. The paperwork needs to be corrected. And please share this. If you agree, give a thumbs up, give a heart, say yes, this FGArt Article 15 needs to be rescinded. Our volunteer sons and daughters cannot be treated like this. this abuse of power by a lieutenant colonel and a 2-star general cannot stand. Cannot stand. And then for us, there's these other agitators with the same agenda to retaliate for years now. I mean, they even threatened, and they even threatened Richard in his death. How did they do that? Because of his name, his memory, his legacy. They put his face, they superimposed it on an inmate, a death row inmate that had just been executed. And the military allowed that to stand. You don't see them coming out for Richard. You don't see them standing up for him at all. And us being put through this, they don't even stand up for Rob either. It's such a disgrace. And and it's such a fine line we walk on, because we need our military. Right? We need our military, we need a national defense. But we don't need them. These evil criminals that are wearing our beautiful uniforms. They want to get into our uniforms, y'all, so that they can do their evil deeds and destroy our country. We need to vet who is allowed to be in uniform. We need to vet them hard. And we need to welcome that vetting. No criminals. No criminals. Because it's just a destruction of our country. Because they'll destroy our volunteer sons and daughters, our future, and the land. Look at what they did to his corpse. That's why they don't want to give it to us. Because look what they did to it. And the desecration of a corpse is also a crime. A crime. And with what we have been told what happened to Richard, that's like 99-year prison sentence. What they did to him in his murder, it's a death sentence. And let's say you're in the getaway car, if you're in the cover-up team, it doesn't matter. You're also guilty of that murder. And, we're looking up the sealed case, and, what were they doing behind the scenes to try to manipulate this whole I mean, when you have the chief medical examiner, Mario A. Rascon-Ortiz, being illegal. He's illegal. He violated his visa. And he's not even supposed to be in a judicial official office acting like a judge unless he's an American citizen. So he's compromised. Like the judge at the Davidian, the Branch Davidians in Waco in the 1990s. He was also compromised and also only did a cause of death on the Branch Davidians and not a manner of death. So when you have a compromised judge, chief medical examiner that does cause of death, right? And is seems to me with the paperwork we have, and that all needs to be confirmed, but he's from Juarez and he's double dipping over there as a medical examiner over there, and Richard's remains are found over there. And maybe that's why there's a problem with law and order in Juarez, Mexico, because a medical examiner is compromised. Absolutely. I think he's connected. He's cartel. I think he's cartel. I mean, how would even the cartel let that go? I mean, of course. Let's just say it. What's going to happen? They're going to do their dirty work. When are we going to stand up and say no? No more. And then you have the DA. That whole mess what happened with the DA from Jaime Esparza, and the shock that Yovan Rosales would win the election, and look into capital criminal cases, look into the Walmart case, look into, move them forward, do her job. Oh my gosh, have a DA that does her job. They wouldn't have any of that. They petitioned to oust her, a duly elected DA, and then somebody pulled some strings to have Bill Hicks nominated because he is not qualified. He is not qualified. He's a disgrace. And then he gets appointed and he doesn't even execute his statement of officer or his oath of office properly. And now he's a usurper of the 34th Judicial District. What? To get in there to block Richard's case, to block the move forward on this, to move these capital cases forward. And then just what it was, yesterday or day before, a capital case couldn't really be, that was a plea deal, 20 something years in prison for brutal murder. Why? Because they can't use the medical examiner. They can't use his testimony because he's illegal. And I can't even believe he made this plea deal, because all he had to do was just sit tight, because everything is illegal in his case, because the DA and the medical examiner is illegal. And then we have now the FBI supervisory director and his wife. You have CID is dirty. You have the abuse of power in the generals on Fort Bliss, and the lieutenant colonel also. I mean, you have Leilani Hart having access, unauthorized access to CID files. And then to add to it, because there's even more after this, right? But to add to it, a very big one, Bob Moore of El Paso Matters, that's owned by El Paso Community Foundation. And Bob Moore targeting our son's case, obstructing justice, trying to hijack our son's story, try to hijack his image, try to play the media to get out there first, so that nobody understands what is going on in El Paso. And you know what? I think he lost because I absolutely believe that the people of El Paso understand what's going on. How can they not, with all the deaths in Juarez right now, the murders, the lawlessness that's going on there in El Paso? They might not know all the facets, but they know that something stinks. Something stinks to high heaven. And it is Bob Moore. Bob Moore. He can't even be an independent journalist because he has violated his tax-free status with El Paso Matters. And he has he's part of the case. He's part of the case. When he collaborated with Leilani Hart and her LDS lawyer friend to obstruct justice and by targeting a whistleblower in our son's case, he became part of the case. So he can't report on this unless he's got someone backing him or he has some money he's going to spend on ads and move it forward and whatever. It's all coming out. It's all being exposed. And I think the people in El Paso understand that. So now we have to respond to this paperwork that we received from the casualty assistance officer and say, look, we need your help. These are illegal, retaliatory, abusive power. Now we're going to say it in a different way, but the punishments that Richard was getting was absolutely a violation of his rights and due process. Absolutely. And it's not just me. Of course, when we first read through it, Rob and I were like, what the heck is this? What the heck? This is a soup sandwich. Remember, I would say, this is a soup sandwich. Can you clean this mess up and tell us what's going on? Because it's a soup sandwich, right? Isn't that what we said at the beginning? And now we know it was total retaliation. The hate speech and abusive power action to create even more hate speech. And that's still ongoing. That led to his murder. That led to his forced removal in uniform, his murder, and the desecration of his corpse. And, I'm just wondering why that woman in Vanessa Guillen's case did not get the death penalty. She absolutely needed to get the death penalty. Why didn't they give her the death penalty? Is there a messed up medical examiner too in that case? A messed up district attorney? I just want to know, because you cannot participate in a crime like what happened to Vanessa Guillen and participate in it and not be given the death sentence. I don't understand that. And as much as we all know, you only have to do a little bit of research. 15 minutes of research. Okay, if you really want to know more, do an hour, do a couple hours of research, put things together, make a timeline about the Walmart mass shooting, and you will absolutely see an orchestrated hate crime, not by Patrick Crusius, but by a group a group of individuals trying to deflect from audits, trying to save their gravy train, so to speak, and interfering with the election. Absolutely. Super obvious. Super obvious. And Christopher Grant with Chris Cuomo and Beto O'Rourke, they're criminals. All of them are criminals. Absolutely. With Donna, right? Yeah, that all of that needs to be investigated. How are we going to really get the murderers who murdered all of those victims, destroying so many lives? I mean, this is so, the dominoes are falling in so many directions. And Richard's case is just that big. And so I think that this abuse of power and the weaponization of a field grade Article 15, the weaponization of a GOMAR, that's not what they're for, to destroy someone until they're murdered. That's not what they're for. It clearly abuse of power. So let me answer some of your questions. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Ruth, for coming on. Thank you, Vicki. Blessings. Thank you to you. Thank you, Kathleen, again. Thank you, Anicia. Thank you for your prayers and your love, as always. And what we need is, I don't know if that petition, I know it's still up there because I just checked it right before I came on. I don't know if you can still sign it. If you haven't signed it, please sign it. Please share it to sign it if it's still active. I don't know. We need to activate it again because this is something we need to do for Richard. We need to absolutely do what we can for him. Can you imagine the hate that he went through? We need to show him some love. We need to show him some love. Oh my gosh. I just, it's like when your kid, falls and gets hurt or whatever, you want to pick him up and you want to hug him, right? You want to give him a Band-Aid, even though it might not. What they did to Richard, we need to, I'm asking for help to show him love. Because it's just going to take that much love. It just has to be overflowing. And I know he's in heaven. I know he's looking down. And that's why I think this is so important to protect his legacy, to fight for him, to find his remains. And God will provide, the angels will point right down to it when the time is right. I can't even believe that finally, after all this time, that we received the notice of death. Huge victory. Huge victory. And so, so we're going to move forward. We're going to take that victory. We're going to pick the standard up of it, right? Take that standard like Richard would hold on to the standard of 143 ADA with such pride, even knowing that those in uniform in 143, in the 32nd ADCOM, were some in uniform that needed to be removed from those beautiful uniforms. So, yeah. Well, thank you so much. And I will be back tomorrow, God willing. And we're just moving forward. We're working very, very hard. And we're working on a website. And It's just very generic right now, but it's called richardhalliday.com. Very generic. I haven't even put up a picture or anything. You might just want to click on it just to see if it's up there and let us know. And we'll be working on that because we have a lot of people to thank. A lot of people to thank that helped us get to this point. And I wish that we could just sign off on this paperwork, but that would defeat the whole battle, and they would get away with it. They would get away with what they did. So I'll give an update again as this progresses. Just breaking news every day. And just always remind people there's some very important things that need to be said. And that is the prime suspects are Leilani Hart, Tavita Nusa, Dallas Hart. There's more, but those are the prime. And of course, it took so long because of the interference with the CID, with Marlon Soto leading that interference. And of course, Tavita Nusa. And then Bob Moore interfering with the narrative, with even more than that, with a whistleblower, with obstruction of justice through El Paso Matters, which was absolutely devastating to the, just deeds of evil, and, and in a violation of everything he signed when he signed the tax-free status, I mean, how evil is that too? And what you need to know about the interference is that in January of 2022, a judicial officer put in a major official criminal complaint. He became a whistleblower, absolutely documenting the interference that was coming out of Fort Bliss CID, namely Tavita Nusa and others. And Marlon Soto failed to initiate an internal affairs investigation. So in 2022, Marlon Soto, these are dirty agents, failed after receiving a very important whistleblowing complaint. They're all important. How do I say this? Well documented, put out there everywhere. He failed to initiate an internal affairs investigation. Now, when we found that out, that's when we filed an internal affairs complaint against Marlon Soto. And yet, the CID fails to even acknowledge that. And it's all documented. And I think that is a very, very important part of this case. And I'm reading through the media, and they are saying that they did everything they could. No! Marlon Soto failed to initiate an internal affairs investigation after receiving an official whistleblower criminal complaint of his bro, Leilani Hart's boyfriend, right? Tavita Nusa. And his interference in this case, and his admission of hurting somebody, and more, and more. And then we put in our complaint, and now the CID wants to say in the media that they did everything they could. That's a total bold-faced lie. They need to acknowledge what is absolutely documented. And that's why it's frustrating when we continue to write Ted Cruz, because he could absolutely stand beside us shoulder to shoulder and say that CID needs to acknowledge that they failed Richard. And so can our Senator, Lindsey Graham, who is very quick at throwing our soldiers into war. He could stand shoulder to shoulder with us and say, this is unacceptable. That CID did not do everything they could. And it's well documented. It's not me saying it. It's the reality that's documented. And I think that's very, very important for people to understand. So, of course, we have to fight for service members, because with leaders like this and a CID like this, who needs enemies? Who needs enemies, right? So thank you so much. God bless you. And I will be back tomorrow, God willing. Bye-bye.